Masechet Ketubot Daf Non He. The Mishnah mentioned that there's a base amount of 100 or 200 zuz in the ketubah, but if someone wants to, they can add even 10,000 more. The sky's the limit they're allowed to add. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah does make a distinction, however, between the base amount and the added amount, that if they only had a kiddushin, and then the marriage ended by death or divorce, then the man or his estate would have to pay only the base amount, but would not have to pay the added amount. That's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But that means that Tanakama would say, even after Kiddushin, he would still have to pay the entire amount. So we saw the Mishnah. The Gemara already asks, isn't this obvious? If someone wants to give more money, shouldn't they be able to give more money? And I said, no, we answered that. Perhaps you would have thought the rabbis would make a standard amount for everyone so as not to embarrass someone who can't afford as much as the next guy. But we do not say that. Rather, each person can use his funds and express his commitment to his wife by giving more if he wants to. Okay, good. Now we're going to learn something added about that. Im rasa lehosif. Now, rasa lichtov la lo katane ela rasa lehosif. Interestingly, the language of the Mishnah says if he wanted to add. It doesn't say if he wants to write, but rather if he wanted to add something. What's the significance of that language? If it said if he wants to write, that would sound like he's writing a separate document. Here's a ketubah, this is 100 or 200, and then he writes another document, a different side obligation that I'm also going to pay $10,000. But it doesn't say that. Rather, it says lehosif. He's adding to what the marriage contract ketubah already said, which means that the added amount is considered an integral part of the ketubah and is going to be treated the same as the base amount. This supports the statement of Rabbi Aibu in the name of Rabbi Yanai that a condition of the ketubah is like the ketubah itself, that the same rules will apply to both. Now, his language is Tanai Ketubah, which means a stipulation. It's a good question whether this applies to all the stipulations that are in the Ketubah. There are many of them. Are they all treated the same as the Ketubah itself? Actually, not. For example, the Benin Dichrin, when the sons who can inherit the dowry of that was given, that sons can inherit the ketubah, but while a wife who gets a ketubah payout can collect from land that was already sold since the ketubah, because it all had a lien on it to pay the wife. But if the payout is to the sons, then the sons can only collect from available land, not from land that the husband their father had already sold. So there are actually some differences. Maybe Rabbi Yanai disputed that and said that it's the same in all cases, maybe not. But in any case, the point that we're making now simply is that the added amount, the base amount of 100 and 200, and the added amount have the same laws. Okay, so now we know that from the language here. Now, why is that important to know that they have the same laws? What will be the practical effect of knowing that the added amount of the extra 10,000 and the base amount of 100 or 200 are treated the same? We're now going to list 14 different items in which we would want to know this, that we might have thought otherwise. Nafkamina lemocheret ulmochelet. If a woman sells the right to collect her ketubah or forgoes the right to collect her ketubah, says you don't have to pay me, then she will have sold or forgiven not only the base amount but also the added amount of whatever it is, 10,000. Ulmoredet, if a woman is a rebellious wife, meaning she's not fulfilling her wifely duties, then we penalize her and we deduct from the amount of the ketubah each week until there's nothing left. And so we'll deduct not only from the base amount, but also from the added amount. Lepogemet, if someone if a wife admits that she received partial payment, but not the whole payment of her ketubah, so she's making a pagam, a blemish in her claim, she has to give an oath in order to collect the rest. This is true not only for the base amount, but also the added amount. She would have to take an oath in order to collect the added amount. Letovaat, if a woman demands her marriage, her ketubah payout, we saw earlier that then if once she comes to Bet Din and demands the payout, she loses the mizonot. She no longer will be sustained regularly. And this is true whether she demands just the base amount or the added amount. Lo averet al dat, woman who goes against the halacha. She's not keeping halacha. She's serving non-kosher food, not following nida, not doing things in a way that will allow them to remain married. So it's her fault that she is leaving that the divorce has to happen. She will no longer get her ketubah payout, not the base amount and not the added amount. L'shevach, if then when the man dies, the husband dies, there's not sufficient money in the inheritance to pay off the ketubah, so she's not going to be paid in full. If it goes to the orphans, and now the orphans increase the value in the meantime, and now maybe the payout doesn't happen right away, maybe the payout happens 10 years later, and by then now it's increased. Does she get more? The answer is no. She will only get a payout that the inheritance could have afforded at the time of the husband's death, and that is true both for the base amount and for the added amount. Lishbu'ah, if there's any case where the wife has to make an oath in order to receive the marriage contract, she will need to make an oath both for the base amount and for the added amount. Lashivi'it, the sabbatical year, which is about to happen in less than a month from now, is the end of the sabbatical year when debts are forgiven. That's true regarding personal debts, but that does not apply to a ketubah. Otherwise, every marriage that's more than 7 years the ketubah will be annulled. So the Shavuot year does not annul the base amount. It also does not annul the added amount. Lakotev kol nechasav lebanav. If someone writes a document and says, I want to give all of my property to my sons, and except for one little field, then that will be for the ketubah. Then she will receive that field, and that will be used to pay off not only the base amount, but also the additional amount of the ketubah. Ligbot min hakarka umin haziburit. Ketubah payments are paid from land. And that's true for both the base amount and the added amount. And if she comes and collects land, she has a right only to inferior quality land. For different types of payouts, like for damages, when someone pays for damages of land, he has to pay from his best land. Now, even though we're talking about the same amounts, if says damages worth $1,000 or a ketubah payout worth $1,000, so you'll give either more inferior land or a smaller piece of higher quality land. So it's going to be the same numerical value. Nevertheless, people generally would prefer higher quality, even if it's less, than something lower quality that's more of it. So for ketubah, for damages, we want to make sure the person is who got the damage is treated better, and so you have to give him the highest amount. For others, it's medium, but for a ketubah, it's sufficient to pay any type of land, even the inferior quality. And there's another law that if the wife goes back to her father's house, could be because the husband's house was too small, or she's more comfortable in her father's house. That's fine. But once she goes back to her father's house, the clock starts ticking. She has to demand her ketubah payout within 25 years. If she's in her father's house and 25 years pass, then that shows that she forgot about it. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to collect it anymore. This is true for the base amount and for the additional ketubah amount that he promises her. And finally, l'chtubat benin dichrin, when we say in the ketubah that sons, if the wife dies first before the husband, then her sons from this marriage have a right to collect the ketubah. They collect not only the base amount, but also the added amount. And so there you go, that we have 14 different halachot that are going to be the same from the base amount and the added amount. All right, very good. Now, Now we're going to have four. We have a lot of lists today. We're going to have four machalokot that are between the sages of Pumbedita and the sages of Mehasia, which is very interesting because a lot of times we have machalokot between individual sages, but it's always a good idea to see which yeshiva that sage is from, because sometimes it's not just a machalokot between individuals, but between geographies. So here's the first one. Itmar. Ketubot benin dichrin, that's the thing we just ended on, that the sons get to inherit if their mother dies before their father. Pumbedita amre la tarfa mimishtabede yartun tenan. So if there's insufficient funds in the inheritance to pay for the ketubah payout to the sons, do the sons collect from land that was sold? If the husband dies or divorced and the payout is to the wife, then the wife does have a lien on all of the husband's property since the ketubah was written, and therefore if he sold land in between, she can go and repossess it. A wife can do that. But what about sons? In Pumbedita, they said, no, the sons cannot repossess land because it says the language of inheritance, and kids that inherit, or anyone who inherits, does not have a right to repossess land to fill out their inheritance. They only get what's available. So to Benin Dichrin only get what's available. That's what they said in Pumbedita. They said no. They said the opposite, that the sons can collect the ketubah payout even from land that had been sold, because yisbun tenan, in their version of what the Mishnah records as the language of the ketubah, it says they will take the money of the ketubah, not inherit. So take means it's owed to them, and just like the mother could take it if she was the one that had been divorced when the father was alive, so too the sons can take it when their mother dies first. But the final halacha is that they cannot collect from the lien because we use the language of inheritance. Okay, maybe Rabbi Aibu did not agree with this and said that they can collect from it, and that's why he said tonight ketubah is like ketubah, but it's not clear if he would say that for everything. But in this case, we actually do have a live machloket about it. All right, second item, metaltele ve'itnehu be'ainaihu. If there are items, movable items, a vase that's set aside for the payment of the ketubah, and if it's here, right, this was an item that maybe she brought into the marriage, or the husband wrote down or set aside and said, here, this will be used to pay your ketubah. If it's here, then and then he dies, she can collect it, and she doesn't need to take an oath, because it's clear to everyone that it's here, and it's set aside and available for her to take. That everyone agrees to. Let nu banai. But what if that vase is not here? Okay, the husband dies, and then on some, in some list somewhere it says that he's going to use this vase, but the vase isn't here. So then what do we do? Pumbedita amre. Belo Shibua. In Pumbedita says she doesn't have to make a vow. Well, we can assume that there's some other item, and so we'll replace the vase with some other item of equal worth. Mehasia said she has to take a vow that she was not already paid with something else. Maybe we suspect that during the marriage, maybe he gave her a gift and said, here, I'm giving you this as partial payment for the ketubah, some item. And then she already had received it. So therefore she has to vow. See, if it's the item is here, the vase is itself here, we see it on the table, then it's obviously he did not give it to her because it's here, so she can take it. But if it's not here, then we don't know. Did he already give it to you? Did he give you something else? Before we make the rest of the payout, you have to swear. And the halacha follows Pumbedita that she does not have to swear. If he set aside a certain amount of land, and he said, this is going to be for the ketubah. He wrote it down. He said, here, this land, these four sides, that will be for your ketubah payment. So if he dies, she can take that without making an oath. It's clear what he meant. Bechad misra, but what if he wrote down only one of the borders? It's not really clear what he means by that. When you write down one border, do you mean, let's say there's a lot of room from that one border to the other edge, but only a little bit of room from that border on the other side? Do you mean the bigger part of it, the smaller part of it? How long? So, Pumbedita amre belo shevu'ah. She does not need to make a shevu'ah, but rather she is believed to say it's this amount and she gets it. No, she has to make an oath because we don't know what exactly he meant, and she would have to swear that it means this side or that side. Is that she does not have to make a swear. We now have the fourth difference between the two schools. Amar le'adim kitvu v'chitmu v'habu le. If a person tells witnesses, I want you to write and sign a deed of gift and give this to the recipient. So he's giving instructions to someone so that he can give a gift. Now, kanumine, if they make an acquisition with a kinyan sudar, then they don't have to go and ask him again. So this, a kinyan sudar is an exchange like nowadays we do with a ketubot. That we require the groom to pick up a pen or something, and by that he acquires it. This one's a little different. This one you're doing a kinyan sudar, an exchange, effectuating an exchange by this type of acquisition to a messenger rather than to the person who's acquiring it. Sometimes people do this nowadays when they are authorizing the rabbi to sell their chametz. They're not selling their chametz to the rabbi, but rather authorizing the rabbi to sell it to a non-Jew before Pesach. But some people will today have the person will pick up something to show that they are authorizing the rabbi. They're making an acquisition, making a formal act to do that. Okay, so if someone is going to give a gift and is going to give a gift through a messenger, so the best thing for him to do is to do a formal acquisition by picking something up, showing, here, I am authorizing you to do that. And if he does make that formal acquisition, then the messenger does not have to go back and ask the gifter any other questions. Let's say the recipient says, oh, can you write a document? He can go and write a document because he has that authorization. But here's the question: Lo kanumine. If the gifter told the messenger, "Go and give this gift," but he didn't do a formal act of picking up a pen or something. Pumbedita amre la sarich imluche be. Pumbedita said it's the same thing. Since he told him he wants to give a gift, once he told him that, then he's authorized to go ahead and continue and do that, and even write a document based on it. However, in Mata Mehasia said that they say that if the recipient says, "Oh, I need a written document," he has to go back and ask because he wasn't completely authorized through that type of formal act. In this case, the halacha is like Bnei Mata Mehasia, that if you don't do a formal act, you have to go and consult again. All right, all this was related to Benin Dichrin, which was the first one, but then we brought the other ones that are also machlokot between these two places. We continue with the Mishnah that said Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that if they were married, and then the marriage ends, so surely then the husband will have to pay all of the amount, the base amount plus the added amount. But if they only had kiddushin, then according to Elazar ben Azariah, the husband has to pay only the 100 or 200, does not have to pay the additional sum. Itmar Rav v'Rabbi Natan Chadamar halacha k'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Chadamar en halacha k'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. We know that Rav and Rabbi Natan have a machloket about this. We're not sure who says what, but we know one of them does follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He does not have to pay the added amount after kiddushin, and the other says halacha does not follow him, but rather Tanakama, that the husband has to pay the full amount even if they only had kiddushin. Now, can we figure out who says which? Tistayim de Rabbi Natan hu damar halacha k'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Must be Rabbi Natan is the one that does agree that halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, doesn't have to pay the whole thing. Deshamin anle Rabbi Natan dazil batal umdina. Because we're about to show a source that Rabbi Natan, in general, says we follow an assumption about the state of mind of what a person would want. Even if a person doesn't say explicitly what they want, are we allowed to kind of read between the lines and read in and think, probably we can assume he would have wanted this and act upon it, or can we not do that? The Binatan says we can act upon it. And therefore, in this case also, we're about to quote the source, but the application for Ketubah is, even though he wrote from now, sometime between the Kiddushin and Nisu'in, he's writing the Ketubah and saying he's going to pay the extra $10,000. But even though he didn't say explicitly, we can assume he would only want that payout to be after they were fully married. And if he dies before Nisu'in and there's only Kiddushin, then most likely he would not want that pay. He doesn't want to give all that money when they weren't even fully married. And so therefore, he would say, halacha is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Now, where do we see that he follows the assumption of a person's state of mind? Tamar binatan halacha Rabbi Shimon Shizuri b'misukan. Misukan, someone in danger. Full case, it doesn't say here, is if someone says to a messenger, write a get for my wife. Then the messenger can write the get, but he can't give it because he didn't authorize him to give it. Until he says, write and give a get to my wife. He has to explicitly say both of those steps. Those are important. However, if the person is dangerously ill, and he says, write a get for my wife, and he dies, and he never said to give it, we can assume that he would want it to have given also, it to be given as well. That would be to save her from Yibum, make her life easier, and so we can give it even though he didn't say it. So you see, that's one example where the Binatan does make an assumption about a person's state of mind, and we act upon it, even though from the letter of his words, we wouldn't be able to. The other case that Binatan happens to talk about is Tirumat Maaser Shel Demai, where also we can access a person's state of mind. Well, in this case, we're actually asking him explicitly. In Amma Aretz, usually they took Tirumah, but they wouldn't necessarily take Maaser, and certainly not Tirumat Maaser. After you take Maaser, give it to the Levi, then a tenth of that tenth has to be given to the Kohen. So if you have Demai, which is, we're not sure. Some Amei Haaretz, most of them do take everything that's needed, but some don't. And so, to be machmir, the rabbi said, if you have Demai, you should take the Maaser and the Tirumat Maaser. What if a person did that? He took the Tirumat Maaser, but then the Tirumat Maaser fell by mistake back into the mixture, and there was not enough in the whole mixture to nullify it. And now, since there is some Tirumat Maaser which can only be eaten by a Kohen in there, so the whole thing can only be eaten by a Kohen, which is going to limit its value. This is a problem. Now, if we knew for sure it was Tirumat Maaser fell in, okay, it's prohibited. Yeah, only a Kohen could eat it. But since it was Demai in the first place, and probably he did take the Maaser already, and the Tirumat Maaser already, and separated it, it's not here. Therefore, Binatan says we can ask him, hey, did you take the Tirumat Maaser before? In most cases, we don't go and ask him because just take it yourself. What's the big deal? You're just taking a little bit. But here, we would lose out on the entire mixture. So he says we can go ask him and rely on his statement to be believed whether he did or not. Okay, so the point here is that Rav Natan does follow a halacha that we follow the assumption of a person's state of mind. If he's on his deathbed, if he said just give a get, he gives it, and just write a get, we can give it also. And so to here, even though the husband does not write in the ketubah, I only want the 10,000 to be given after nisuin, not after kiddushin. Even though he didn't say so explicitly, we can assume that's what he wanted, and therefore the Binatan agrees with the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. But then we say not so fast. This is assuming that Rav would not make assumptions about a person's state of mind. But we're about to quote a halacha where Rav also does. We have, in order to transfer something, if someone is healthy, you need to do a formal act. They can't just say so. That land is yours. No, you can't just say so. You have to do something in order to acquire it. One typical easy way of acquiring it is with a kinyan sudar, a symbolic exchange with a pen, a handkerchief. that is lifted up, and that's showing, yes, I really want to give this to you. Now, that's one way for a healthy person. Someone who's on his deathbed, since he's not going to have time necessarily to go ahead and do this, and whatever someone says on his deathbed is probably very serious about it, so something that's even orally said on a deathbed also has the power to make a transfer. Now, what if a person confusingly does both? He gives a gift on his deathbed, and he also makes a kinyan sudad. Here it says that he wrote the kinyan sudad. The idea of a kinyan sudad is that it makes it so official that you would actually write it down. So he does both. What do we do with that? Is that better than, even better, double the power? Or is this just confusing? Maybe the fact that he did a kinyan sudad shows that he does not want it to be effectuated as a gift of someone on his deathbed. The difference would be that if someone gives a gift on his deathbed but gets better, he can take it back. Whereas if he did a kinyan sudad, he would not be able to take it back. So that's the question. If he does both, Rav says this has double the power. It's like riding a chariot with two horses to pull it. Even if one is slow, the other one will still pull it fast. And so this has the benefit of both types of kinyan according to Rav. Shmuel Amar, Layadana ma edun ba. Shmuel says, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what he meant. I can't assume that he wanted it to have power of two. I don't know. But Rav says, I can assume. He did it on purpose because he wanted the power of two things. So you see, Rav here does follow the assumption of what we think a person had in mind. Let's explain further what they say. Rav said we give it the power of two horses, meaning has the full effect of a healthy person who does a kinyan act and the oral statement of someone on his deathbed, and each has separate powers, has both. Has both the power of someone who gives as a healthy person with a formal acquisition and someone who gives orally on their deathbed. And what's the difference? It has the benefit of being someone who's healthy, that if he gets better, then he cannot change his mind because he did the formal act of acquisition with a sudar. So that makes it stronger than if it was only an oral statement on his deathbed, where if he got better, he could change his mind. So it has that benefit, that strength that he can't change his mind. It also has the benefit of the force of an oral statement on a deathbed. She'im amar halva'ati leploni, halva'ato leploni. Usually with a kinyan sudad, you can use that for objects or land, but you can't transfer a loan to that. Transferring a loan is, he owes it to me, he'll owe it to you instead, like signing a check over to someone else that we can't do nowadays, but used to be able to do. You cannot use a kinyan sudad for that, but oral statement of a person on his deathbed does work for that. And so, because he did both, it has the strength of both types of transfer, according to Rav. Ushmuel amar layadana ma'edun ba. Shmuel says, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what he meant. Shema lo gamal haknoto ela bishtar ve'enshtar lachar mita. Maybe he meant only to transfer it with the bill of sale. Bill of sale here means the kinyan that he does with a sudar that he would write down. And in that case, it only is only ineffective while he's alive, not after he's dead. In other words, maybe he did the act, he did the kinyan, and by doing the kinyan, he's showing that he only wants it to be effectuated through the kinyan and not as a deathbed sale, and so a deathbed transfer, and therefore the deathbed transfer does not work, and the other one did not happen until he died, and now he's dead, and so it does not work. So I don't know which one it is. And I can't assume that it has the power of both. So, Ela tarvayu azle batar umdena. So what we see from that is that Rav also follows a person's intent, and we assume he did both because he wanted that to have the power of both. And so both Rav and Rav Natan have the law of we assess a person's intention. And since they both agree to that halacha in general, both of them would apply it here and say that a man generally will not want to give his gift his wife give his wife this extra $10,000 if they didn't have nisuin and only kiddushin. So now we have to explain whoever we don't know. Now we can no longer distinguish who said what, but we have to explain one of them why they would disagree. Mandamat halacha Shapir, one who says we follow ben Azariah. That makes sense because we follow the person's intention, and the person's intention would not want to give the added amount of the ketubah to someone he's not married to, fully married to. But we can't explain it. Even the one who says we do not follow Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is also making an assumption about the person's intention. Why did he promise that added amount of ketubah? Mishum mikrubeh da'atahu, in order to bring her mind closer to him. If by writing down in the ketubah, I'm going to give you an extra $10,000. She's like, wow, look how much he loves me, and she will be more closely connected to him, feel more love to him. And that took effect. It worked. In other words, right, she will already have that attitude and show him that new attitude from the time of the writing of the document, even before the nisuin. So since the man's intention in adding a larger amount to the ketubah is not only because after nisuin, then he wants to take care of her. He wants to show his commitment even beforehand in order to receive her love in return. And therefore, his intention is that the payout should happen even after kiddushin and before nisuin. So so we can explain both Rav and Rabbi Natan, whoever said which one, we're not sure, but we can explain both sides with the assumption that we can read a person's intent, and people have different intents. Some people intend only to give the big payout after Kid Nisuin. Some people will have the intent to want to have the payout given even before Nisuin, because already that commitment will engender greater love in the couple.